compensation. Right? Okay, good. So just a quick introduction before Bob gets into the presentation in kind of more detail. This was one of those things that was very important for the city to conduct this year. I think I started here January, February, and I think the you can see him, brought it to my attention like the first 2 days I was here. So from what I understand, I will be in class in total compensation study that's been performed here citywide since 2008, I think. So it's it's a big deal. We got the money is budgeted for this fiscal year, so starting July 1, this study. So that was a good thing, and now we're kicking off already. So we've been moving quickly on it. So we got RFP, and then we've brought in PAQ, public sector personnel consultants to conduct this for us. So just to give you an idea, the first part of this is the classification, which is you're all going to be receiving an email on Thursday from Nicole that is going to, it's called a position description questionnaire. So with that, you're going to be filling out along the details that's on there. It's very instructive. If you have any questions on it, let us know. We're also going to be going over it today, just kind of give you a preview of it. But the first thing, and the big part of that, is to identify the positions here in the appropriate classification. So that'll be done for every position to exclude sworn, so police officers, fire, and software as well. But all of the positions will be evaluated when it comes to classification. Remember, it's not the employee that's being evaluated, it's the position. Right? This isn't an evaluation, that's what we have annual evaluations for. It is to evaluate the position to ensure that it's properly classified. Another big thing with this study is to identify if titles. Right? We have some old titles here, so this is an opportunity to modernize our titles. So that's kind of the big second item we put to the study. And the third is big item is the total compensation. So with this, PSPC is able to get obviously appropriate classification titles and survey them out to the market. Right? Our market will be comparators that we're going to be obviously sitting down with the groups on. We're going to be circling back with all the groups. Oh, by the way, if we go back even farther, is we met with all the associations about 2 weeks ago, right? About 2 weeks ago. And so we started talking about this class comp and what it is. And obviously, a lot of the groups, I think we all requested this study multiple times over the years. So we informed them all that we're doing it. But we're going to be circling back with all the groups to identify who are our comparators and what does total compensation mean. So we're going to be circling back with all the groups probably over the next week or two. So just FYI on that. Let's see. And then with that, we're going to have true data. Right? This process obviously takes quite a few months because you can see we have a couple hundred employees that are going to be going through the PAQ process. The third party has a lot of research on the comparators that we have, whether it's 13, 14, 15 cities. That's a lot of MOUs they got to go through. This process takes quite a few months. But with, at the end, the final product is we will have true data of where every position in the city of Montebello, where it ranks in the market, right? We're going to know for every it's 7% behind market, 8% behind market, 50% behind market, at market. We will know for every position. So it's good data. Now, what we do with that, obviously, it involves many different factors. But at least when we go to sit down and talk, we can learn all the different groups is true actual data. It's evaluate that, but the only way to kind of know where to go is to know everything that we're behind the market, and this is the way of what. So with that, I'll be able to further detail on what a PAQ is, kind of the overall project and how it works, what the study is. And again, it's one of those things that a long time coming, so we're excited to finally conduct the study. Typically, like the top years. So again, 12 years. So, but again, Bob will walk us through it. And if you have any questions, you want to here and answer any questions that you have. All right, Bob.
Yeah, no, I think that was a good introduction, Nick, and I appreciate that. So I thought today what we would do is just go over a little bit of what we mean when we say, classification and a compensation study, cover some of the topics of what each one of those terms mean, a little bit of what the study is and a little bit of what the study isn't, and then we'll get into everybody's homework assignment. Kind of everybody's favorite thing is the take-home work, the position analysis questionnaire that Nick alluded to. So that we can talk about how we can do our job and how we can hear the 3 things that need to be done as part of this project. So we'll cover all of that today and really jump into that. But just to begin, maybe at the high level, my name is Bob Longmire. I'm with Public Sector Personnel Consultants. As the name suggests, we do personnel consulting for the public sector. That's really it. So we get a chance to do maybe 30 or 40 of these studies a year. In the pre-COVID days, we were traveling around the country a lot, in these kind of council chambers, meeting with everybody, meeting with different employees, hearing directly from the employees what it is that they do. Now our ability to travel and to do those things is a little more limited now, just for some safety items, but we still don't want to let the project just have to sit around and wait for those. So we want to make sure that we give everybody opportunities to, that we have opportunities to hear from every single employee what it is that they do. So we have the opportunity to do this a lot. We do a lot of work there in the LA area. Recently I completed Riverside and San Bernardino and Colton and Santa Ana. We're just starting up San Bernardino Valley Municipal Water District. I think I got all those terms in the right order. So we get a chance to do this a lot. Really the idea here is that we can ask good questions. The whole heart of the study is to be able to answer 3 questions for every job there at the city. Number 1 is going to be, does the job title make sense? Number 2 is, does the job description accurately reflect what you do? And the 3rd is, what's the going market rate? If you don't sell a house, if you don't pull the kids out of school, if you commute in a different direction, what will that city pay? That's a relatively factual question. Now, if you think through each one of those, we need to know what the employee is actually doing. Now, we could go off the old job descriptions. We could assume that the old job descriptions are correct, but I'll bet you that's not the case. I think it's been maybe somewhere in the order of 15 years since a study like this has been done. So I'm going to go on the assumption that your existing job description doesn't accurately reflect what you do. Now, maybe it does, and that's great, and we can just use that. But we want to make sure that we're hearing from every employee what it is that you do. Now, if you notice, there's a couple things that this study is not. Right up front, as soon as we say HR, staffing, consultant, and Bob, people start to get a little bit worried, right? Those are some terms that people might be a little bit concerned about. So right up front, it's not a staffing needs analysis. No one's being let go as part of this process. Number 2, no salaries are being reduced as part of this process. Number 3, nothing we say or put in Excel or recommend supersedes the bargaining process. At the end of the day, everything that we recommend is data that lives at the table. It's meant to be bargained over, it's meant to be negotiated, it's meant to be discussed. Okay, so right up front, this is something most organizations do, as Nick had said, every 3 to 5 years. I think it's been maybe 13 to 15 years since something like this has been done. So all of that to say, these are good, healthy things that most organizations do frequently. To be able to say, what's the going market rate? How do I recruit and retain quality staff? Again, this is not a performance review. All of this information, we're not here to say, are you good at your job? We're here to jump on the moving train that is your life and document it, okay? So there's that side of things. Hold on here. Somebody else is coming in. Okay, so there's that side of things. So from the classification side, kind of from the front end, nobody's being let go, no salaries are being reduced. However, at the end of this, there's the compensation portion. Right? As soon as people hear compensation, as soon as they hear market study, everybody immediately goes, well, I'm behind market, I'm criminally underpaid, and I'm going to get a large increase as a result of this study. Now, that might be true. It might not be true. So the best advice I can give on the compensation side of things is don't expect a huge windfall as a result of this study. This is not the lottery. It's not a rising tide that floats all boats. This isn't COLA. This is the process by which we go out and say, what's the going market rate? And that question is different than, can the city afford to pay the market rate. Okay, we'll talk about what that looks like here in a minute. But maybe those are some helpful bookends to think about the project. Nobody's being let go. No salaries are going backwards. However, you still work for the city, and now we can have data at the table where everybody can look at it and to have a conversation about what the going market rate is. You can be able to say, here's where we are. Now, where do we want to be? How do we move from where we are to where do we want to be? If it's been 13 years since you've done a study, whatever situation you are in, you might not be able to get out of it in 1 year. It might take multiple years to get out of any kind of hole that you are in relationship to market. So what it looks like for each individual employee, what might you see on your paycheck as a result of this? We have no idea. So the best advice I can give you is don't expect anything as a result of the study. However, we may see some salaries that need to be increased. How many, who, where, when, all of those things are details that we don't know yet. That's why we go and do this study. Like Nick had said, this is data that's meant to live at the table and be discussed and be bargained over and be negotiated around. So let me camp on the classification side of things for just a minute, then I'll pause for questions in the room and we'll go from there. So we've used the term classification, we've used the term compensation. I'm going to focus on the classification side of things. Classification is answering the first two questions of does the job title make sense and does the job description accurately reflect what you do? Okay, there's around about 178 employees who are going to be completing a questionnaire. Sworn police and uniform fire, they don't have to complete the PAQ. We're not going to change the job title of a police officer or a firefighter. You know, those are standard industry terms. So they're not going to be participating in the PAQ portion. They're going to be participating in the total compensation portion that we'll talk about here in a minute. Everybody else, I want to make sure that there's that we have a job series and we have a titling protocol that makes sense. So we have about 118 titles that are in use, give or take, around the city. I don't know if that's too many. I don't know if that's too few. But essentially what we're trying to do is we're trying to answer the question to say, hey, if we went through an experiment and we handed out questionnaires to every employee and people who have the same job title, who are in different departments, are they doing the same thing? Ooh, maybe, maybe not. You know, that's a little bit hard to say, right? But we're going to be able to get the data back and know that. All right. So when we get that information back, one of the outcomes you might see is maybe we have two people in two different departments and they currently have the same job title. We get these PAQs back and they're doing wildly different things. So maybe you see that we recommend a new job title where you once had one title, we now have two. We have to split those titles apart because they're doing different things. Maybe you have the opposite. Maybe right now you have two people who have different job titles. We get these questionnaires back, we read them over, and they're actually doing the same thing. So maybe we merge those titles together. That's classification. It's kind of boring. It's just titling protocol for are we being consistent when we say a 1, a 2, a 3, a senior, a lead, a coordinator, an analyst, a specialist, a supervisor, a manager. Do we have consistency across the organization when we use those terms? That's task number 1. Task number 2 is updating the job descriptions. In order to do these two things, we need to actually know what you do. We can't just guess. If you ask us to write a job description for an accountant or a mechanic or a police officer or a whatever, and you don't give us any information, we can do that, but we're going to be wrong. Every city that we work with, every organization that we go into has different nuances. They have a little bit different specialties. They do things in a little bit of a different way. So everywhere we go, we want to be sensitive to that, and we want to hear directly from the employees. The way we do that is the position analysis questionnaire. It's your homework assignment. It's why we are here today. If you remember nothing else, remember, please do a good job on this questionnaire. As Nick said, a link is going to go out on Thursday. So 2 days from now, a link is going to go out and or an email is going to go out and it's going to have a link in it. You can click on that link to start a new questionnaire. I'm going to show you how to save your questionnaire in a minute. We're going to walk through it page by page. But every time you click on that link, you'll start a new questionnaire. It's one of the most common questions we get is how do we get back to the work that I already started? We'll show you. We saved it. Everything's fine. We always have any information that you type. But the idea here is We want to hear from each individual employee. Okay, you can work on these as part of a team. For lack of a better concept, if there's 10 people and you all have the same job title, and all 10 of you, for lack of a better concept, are interchangeable, the 10 of you can complete a questionnaire together, and then you can use that questionnaire so that we know what all 10 people are doing. Now, we're going to assume everybody's doing the same thing. So if you have the same job title as somebody else, but you do things a little bit differently, maybe go ahead and complete a questionnaire separately so that we can evaluate those jobs independently of one another. So whether you want to work on them as a team or whether you want to work on them individually, either one works okay for us. We're just trying to learn from the employees what it is that you do. If you remember, this isn't a performance evaluation. It's not a writing assignment. You don't get extra points for suffering in silence. You can use your existing job description. You can talk to your supervisor. You can talk to coworkers. I think printing out your existing job description and carrying it around with you for a week, marking it up, crossing it out, writing on it, is a really good way to get started in this process. So if you remember nothing else from today, remember, please complete these PAQs. Please take them seriously. This is your chance to tell us what it is that you do. All right. Second, we have the opportunity to meet directly with individual employees. Pre-COVID days, this was one-on-one. This was me and Sam there on site, traveling around, meeting with everybody, hearing directly what it is that you do. You know, show me this, show me that, and we'd be able to talk a little bit more directly. This is going to look like Zoom meetings now. It's going to look like meeting over the computer, and just we'll have your PAQ. We'll be reading through it, and we're just going to ask more questions. To be completely honest, this is an opportunity for us to learn more about your job. A lot of people are just more comfortable if we sit and talk and we have a conversation. And just to be able to go back and forth to say, hey, what is it that you do? Help me understand a little bit more. What about this? Where do you start and where does your supervisor stop? You know, how does this interaction work? Give me some examples of problems that you've run into, you know, just for us to learn your jobs. This is really helpful twofold. Number one, so that we can suggest a good job title, but number two, so that we can find your job out in the market. We're going to talk about that in a minute, but as you can imagine, not every organization calls the same job the same thing everywhere we go, right? You might have a 1 and a 3. They have a senior and a specialist and an analyst and a coordinator, and you know, they do this and you do this, and it's a little bit different. So the more that we can know about your job, the better we can complete our 3 tasks. Does the job title make sense? Does the job description accurately reflect what you do? And what's the going market rate? So those are the 3 things. The last thing I'll note on classification here before I pause for questions is we're not changing working conditions. Think about the direction the information is flowing. You are telling us what it is that you do. We're not coming into your city and telling you how to run transportation. We are coming here to learn from you what it is that you do so that we can suggest a good job title and that we can update your job description and we can find what you do out in the market. All right, let me pause there for any questions in the room. Any questions on classification before we jump into compensation? No questions? Okay. All right, I'll go on to compensation. If you have any questions, we can always address them at the end. So feel free to ask any questions if you have them. We're totally open book, and I'm happy to answer any questions that come up. But kind of the third question, relatively straightforward, relatively factual. If you were to go do this somewhere else, what would they pay you? Now, as I've said, I've had the opportunity to meet with somewhere on the order of 2,000, probably a little bit more employees directly through these one-on-one meetings that I talked about a minute ago. You know, we've traveled around to a lot of different cities and a lot of different states, a lot of different organizations, and I've never walked into a meeting and had somebody say, listen, I'm really glad you're here. I go into HR every 2 weeks. I tell them I'm overpaid, and they just won't take money away from me, right? I've never had that. Probably never will. So there's a little bit of an assumption that if you ask an employee, are you underpaid? Could you make more money if you went to work somewhere else? There's an assumption that every single employee is going to say, yes, I'm the one that's underpaid. The reason you do these studies is so that you can have an objective third party that answers that question from a factual, data-driven standpoint. So we're going to go out and we're going to cross job descriptions, org charts, salary schedules, the benefit plans, the MOUs from about 15 different organizations. And we're going to be able to answer the question, how do you line up salary schedule to salary schedule? And how do you line up total compensation to total compensation? It's an entirely different thing when an objective third party says, hey, listen, we have 45 job classifications that are more than 5% behind market. They're spread this much throughout these different bargaining units. And if we want to get all of these classifications to market, here's what that costs per year. And to have that conversation with the people who sit in the chairs that you're looking at there in the council chamber, that's a different conversation than the employees say they're underpaid. That's the idea here, so that we can have data that lives at the table, that everybody can have an accurate understanding of where are we, so that we can then have the conversation of where do we want to be. Right? That conversation of where do we want to be, that's where bargaining comes in. That's where budget comes in. That's where political realities of the world come in. Right? So how do all of those factors intersect? That's a difficult conversation, but at least we want to be able to equip everybody with the accurate information of here's the going market rate so that you can have that conversation. Built into that right off the bat is comparator selection. So we're going to be providing a list to all of the bargaining units that say, here's our first pass at comparators. Now you guys are a full service city. You do police, you do fire, you do transportation. Not everybody has that unique mix of organizations or of services. So we're probably going to have 15 different organizations that we choose from. Out of that, maybe only 10 have police, maybe 10 have fire, and those might not be completely overlapping, but we want to have one giant basket to choose from, and then each job we'll try to get enough examples to have a statistically significant sample size for that job that we're looking at. To be included in those comparator groups, we want to have people who have similar jobs. I want to know, where do you recruit people from? Where do you lose people to? One of the first exercises is we got all of the employees' addresses. You know, we took the names off them. I don't want to know any names or any job titles. I just want to know, where do people live? And then we can start to see, what does it look like? You guys tend to be a little more inland of the 5. You tend to be a little more north versus south. You tend to be a little bit more inland than coastal. So if I have to choose some comparators, and I have 2 equal comparators, and one of them's more inland than coastal, well, I'm going to go with the one that has more people living nearby it than the one who doesn't. We also want to make sure we have similar cost of living. Now we want to make sure we have similar services, right? So you can start to see this becomes a complicated analysis. All of that to say, we're going to make the first pass. We're going to then open it up, and all of the bargaining units are going to have agreement and input into the conversation of who these comparators are. So the note here is, you have a voice in this process. Your groups are being involved in this conversation. They're also involved in the conversation on what is total comp. Now, I don't have a slide on this, but the easiest way to think about it here is going to be based on what the end result looks like. We're going to be able to go out and do a salary survey and to say, all right, for this job here, here's your rate and here's your relationship to market based on salary schedule only. Here's where you line up maximum of the range to maximum of the range, right? Think top step here. This is where the top step lines up. Here's how your salary compares to the salary out in the market. From that point, we can then say, all right, how do we go relate to the market in a total compensation way? Once we have all the contributions to medical, health, dental, vision, premiums, once we have all the contributions towards retirement and health savings accounts in retirement, and normal cost contributions to CalPERS, you know, are we talking tier 1, tier 2, are we talking PEPRA, you know, are we talking any deferred compensation, are we talking contributions towards employees' retirement premiums, in retirement before Medicare eligibility age, you know, all of those factors. How do we look at retirement? What are we kicking in towards the employees' retirement benefits? On top of that, what are we doing for what I like to call ad pays? How do we treat longevity, education, bilingual, certification pay? How do we handle all of those different things that can represent a statistically significant portion of an employee's compensation package? So again, what if we go out and do a study and we find out that you're 5% behind on salary, but 5% ahead on benefits. Is that good? Do we win? Do we stop? Do we call that just, hey, we're all square? That's a difficult conversation. That's a conversation that's meant to take place at the table. What do we value? What do we want to be as an organization? You know, what if we find out the opposite? What if we find out, you know, we're really far behind on salaries and we are a training ground for the city next door. And as soon as we get someone hired, as soon as they get their license, they're jumping ship and going next door because that organization offers more. Those are the kind of conversations you can have when you're armed with this kind of data. This is the conversation around total comp. This is the conversation around a market study. So again, back to my initial statement, where this ends up, how this hits your paycheck, I don't know. Best advice I can give you is don't expect anything as a result of this study. However, take the PAQ seriously, because the better of a job you can do telling us what you do, the more accurate we can be in finding your job out there in the market. Let me end this portion with a couple thoughts. As you can see, this total comp and the compensation portion answers the question, where are you? Negotiation, finance, political realities of the city dictate where do you want to be. The market's factual, it is where it is, and we want to be able to assist in the conversation to say, where are you and where do we want to get? If it's been 13 years since a study has taken place, you might not be able to fix it all in 1 year, especially given the budget awkwardness that is COVID. You may not be able to address it all in 1 year, okay? So again, best advice I can give you, don't expect anything as a result of the study. However, this is a really healthy and good exercise. And my experience has been, once you know the relationship to the market, you can't unknow that. So it's really good that the groups have access to this information. So let me pause there. Any questions on the compensation side of things before we jump into the PAQ today?
No questions.
No? Okay, awesome. Well, we'll jump into the PAQ and we'll go from here. So couple quick notes. An email is going to go out on Thursday. That email is going to come from HR and it's going to have all the details and instructions in it. The PAQ is going to have a video that plays. You have to look at me again on every single page, but you've been here to this meeting, so you can ignore the video that plays automatically on the beginning of each page in the PAQ. You can all work on it as a group. Again, if you want to sit around, have one person type it up and have 10 people contribute, that's great. We also have the opportunity, if you're a little bit more uncomfortable with that, if you want to fill it out on paper, there's a Word document you can print out, fill it out on paper. We also have a Spanish version where you can complete it. The questions are in Spanish. You can write it in Spanish, and Sam can read that, and will get us the feedback, and we can complete it. So basically, the idea here is we want to hear from every employee. We don't want to have anything be an obstacle for employee participation. The most important thing is for you to tell us what your job entails. This PAQ is simply meant to be a vehicle that tells us that, and we want to be able to get it. So kind of right off the bat, first thing you're going to see is a drop-down list. So you're going to be able to select your name, your department, your job title, your name, your email, your supervisor's title, your supervisor's email from a drop-down list. That's going to automatically pre-populate page 2 with any of the information. If anything isn't correct in the payroll file, that's okay. You can change it on page 2. We just have to start somewhere. We have to get this file so that we can have some information pre-populated. And if anything isn't correct, that's okay. You can complete it on page 2. Also on page 2, the first question that's kind of mandatory is, are you working on this as part of a group? If you are, select yes, and it'll take you to another page where you're able to tag the employees that you're working on this with. Works the same way as like Facebook or Instagram. Just start typing the first 3 or 4 letters of their name, and it will auto-suggest them from the payroll file. Go ahead and click on that, and it will add them to the PAQ. So it works pretty much just like everything else you're familiar with. And this is how we know that all those people participated in the PAQ, and then we can have them accounted for, and we can cross them off the list of people who need to still complete the PAQ. The next portion is going to be the position's purpose, kind of the primary function. The way to think about this is if I were to say, hi, I'm Bob, it's nice to meet you. What do you do? Put that there. We're looking for 3 to 5 sentences. Again, think about the first kind of job summary that exists on your job title. That's what we're looking for here. You don't need to make it sound fancy like it belongs on a job description. We have job description writers who do that. You know, we just kind of lock them in a closet and throw food to them, and they know all the job description verbs. That's their job. So you don't have to worry about that. You just give us the content and we will complete the job description. But this is where we're going to build that position's purpose, the summary. Why do you get a paycheck? Why do you show up to work in the morning? What's the primary purpose? Give me the high level, 3 to 5 sentences. That's what we're looking for there in that first section. The next part's comparable job titles. So if you happen to know what your job is called out in the market, if you're one of the people who like to keep an eye on the job postings, or you ran across your copart at a event or like an expo, and you happen to know what that's called and you want to tell us, that's great. You can put it here. If not, no worries. That's our job to go find it. This is just an opportunity. Some people really want to tell us what their job is called at the other cities, and we'll start reading the job descriptions there. Not to say we agree with your assessment. You know, if you put in city manager here, we're not going to benchmark you to the city manager at the store, at the city next door. Okay, so just give us an idea if you know this. If not, no worries. Totally optional question. All right, next thing, right up top, you're going to notice the Save and Continue Later button. The Save and Continue Later button is a way for you to send yourself a customized link that is only for you. The email that goes out on Thursday from HR will have a link in it. When you click on that link, it will generate a new questionnaire every time. So if you get halfway through your PAQ and close your browser, you won't be able to get back to it unless you sent yourself a Save and Continue Later. Now, if you do that, if you accidentally click out of it, no problem. Get a hold of HR. They'll email us. We'll manually send you a link, and it's totally fine. You won't lose anything that you've typed. We never really lose data. We just got to look it up manually and send you a link, okay? So use the Save and Continue Later button to send yourself a link. It's a good thing to just do right away when you get to the second page, and then you can keep working. You only need to do that once. You don't have to click Save every page. Just do it one time and you're good to go. So this is honestly the hardest page on the PAQ. If you think about your existing job description, you have those bullet points. You're doing those functions, those tasks, those duties. You do something every day, right? Work comes in one side of your office. You apply your knowledge, your tools, your technique, your years of experience. You did something to that. It then leaves changed. You affected it. You did something. What was that? So that's what we're trying to get at here. We're looking for where do you spend a percentage of your time, and then what are those functions, tasks, and duties. So here on the left-hand side, where you have a percentage of time, go ahead and give us, you know, I spend 25% of my time performing this function. Then over here, give us maybe 3 to 5 sentences about what that function is. The percentage of time is always a little bit tricky to some people. So a couple ways to think about this. You know, if your job is highly routine and you do the same thing day in and day out and you work 9 to 5 and it's pretty standard, go ahead and break up your time as a percentage of time of a day. If you've been here for 10 years and no day has ever been the same, maybe think in terms of a week, a month, or a year to break that up. So however you want to do that works for us. Try to make up the percentages, add up close to 100. You know, if you put 200, we can't get you 2 paychecks. But what we're trying to figure out is where do you spend a majority of your time? You know, are you spending 5% of your time running parts to a job site, or are you spending 95% of your time, right? If you're spending 95% of your time, maybe you're a delivery driver, right? That's what we're trying to figure out. So where are you spending a majority of your time? All right, next section. We're starting to get into the knowledges, the skills, the information sources. We're trying to know what you need to be knowledgeable of and skilled in to do this work, you know, so that you're not a danger to yourself or others. What kind of skills do you need to have? If you think about your existing job description, remember that section, knowledgeable of or skilled in. Again, this is the part we're going to try to update. This is what we're looking for to get your thoughts on that. If your existing job description covers it, that's great. You can type it in there. You can tell us that. that's totally fine. But we just want to get your input, your thoughts on what you need to be knowledgeable of and skilled in. Next section, I want you to put on your human resources hat for a minute. Pretend you have to go out and recruit for this position. What would you want someone to have in terms of minimum years of education to do this job? You know, can you do this job if you have a high school degree? What about an associate's degree? Do I need to have a doctorate? Again, think minimum. You know, we can always hire somebody above the entry level. You know, someone with a doctorate wants to come to work for the salary range that's offered. That's great. But, you know, if we say, hey, listen, I think you need to have 35 years of experience, a doctorate, and 6 masters, well, we might have a hard time finding a candidate. Okay? So, again, I'm a little bit of a fan of, I don't want to let education get in the way of the right person. That being said, I imagine most jobs require more than a heartbeat. I imagine most jobs require some knowledge, some experience, maybe some education to complete them. Down at the bottom, we're starting to talk about education. So any licenses or certifications that are required. Do I need to have a license in something on day one? You know, am I a bus driver? And that bus will not move at 9 a.m. unless I have a CDL with a passenger endorsement. So what do I need to have day one? What can you train me to get over time and I can become a more valuable employee? You know, do I have to be a licensed CPA? Do I need to be a certified public engineer? You know, what do I need to have day one? What can I get over time? All right, last couple pages here, stick with me, we're almost done. On this part, we're going to start to talk about some of the authority, the accountability, maybe the autonomy of the position. We're trying to find out what the difference is between a 1, a 2, a 3, a senior, a lead, a crew leader, a supervisor, a manager, you know, a superintendent. How do we use all those words? A lot of times those differences are the amount of authority you have to make decisions, where you get your instructions. You know, so these first part of questions kind of think in terms of, you know, if I were to come to work, would they say, hey, you know, congratulations on being hired. You have 10 things to do today. Here's where task number 1 is located. Here's how to do task number 1. Oh, you have a question? Let me help you. All right, your task number 1's done. I've reviewed it as your supervisor. Let's move on to task number 2. And now that's what your day looks like. Or is it, hey, congratulations on being hired. Good luck. Well, it's probably a little closer to that second example than we're all comfortable with. But that's what we're trying to get an idea of. How do you get your instructions? How do you raise your hand and ask questions? If you don't know the answer to this, is that it? Does nobody know the answer? Are you the subject matter expert? And if you can't resolve this problem, nobody can? Is that what this looks like? So that's what we're trying to get at. Second part of this authority and accountability is, you know, when problems come up, what are the outcomes of bad decisions? If you make a mistake, what's the city liable for? Where do you raise your hand and say, I'm sorry, I can't make this decision. I'm only a 2. In order to do that, you need to be a 3. You need to be the lead. You need to be the supervisor. I can only approve this. Or are you the person that says, no, these budget numbers are correct, and that's the accurate representation of our department because I've reviewed it and it's my job to sign off on it. Or no, this is a correct policy. I'm responsible for policy updates, and this is our new policy and it's going before the city council. And I'm the person who signs off on that. Do you make recommendations? Does your boss come to you and say, hey, listen, we got to have this ready. Can you do this and I'll review it? What does that line of demarcation look like? Admittedly, that's going to be a gray line, but where those things fall are what we're trying to look at. Finally, last page. Everyone can take a deep breath. I said last page for most people. We're going to go with your interactions with others. You know, who do you represent the city to? Are these residents? Are these local, state, federal authorities, contractors, volunteers? You know, who do you work with? Who do you represent the city to? Then finally, do you supervise anybody? So if you say yes, it'll bring you to the next page. The last box here is going to be for, is there anything we didn't ask you? Do you have any other relevant information that you think is useful for us to know? Is there anything we forgot to ask? Again, remember the 3 questions. Does your job title make sense? Does your job description accurately reflect what you do? And what's the going market rate? Do you think there's any other information we need to know to answer those questions? That's what we're trying to get at. So there's also a section for you to attach some documents. So if you think there's anything that's useful to be attached, that's a great place to do it too. Finally, if you supervise other people, it's going to bring you to this last page. Tell us their names, tell us their job titles of who you supervise. Then go through a quick hire and fire matrix to say, are you the person that recommends hiring them? Are you the person who they call if they're coming in sick? Do you recommend disciplinary action? Do you review their work? Do you train them? Do you approve overtime? You know, are you the person who's recommending that this employee be recalled in the event of an emergency? What kind of decisions are you making? Where do you say, yes, this is my decision? And where are you making a recommendation only? Then it's going to bring you to the last page. Go ahead and sign your name. You can click and drag on your mouse to sign your name. Or if you're at the working on it on the phone or a tablet, you can just use your finger to trace it like you're checking out at the grocery store. Type your name, click next. When you click next here, an email is going to go to your supervisor that looks like this. It's going to say a position analysis needs your approval, and the supervisor is going to be able to review and approve this. They're going to be able to click on a link and read through the questionnaire. Supervisors cannot change anything the employees wrote, but what we're trying to get is the supervisor's understanding of the position so that we can have a little bit more details about what this position entails, what it does, a little bit of what it is, a little bit of what it isn't. So this is also a great opportunity for supervisors to tell us, hey, we're having a difficult time recruiting and retaining staff. You know, as soon as we get somebody trained, they go to the city next door, and just kind of give us an idea of what that looks like there. All right, it's about as fast as I can talk through this. Any questions about anything we've discussed so far?
Quiet, Bob.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that's it for the day then. I appreciate your time. Thanks for coming in. Again, just kind of, if you remember nothing else, please take these PAQs seriously. And if you have any questions you didn't want to ask in front of the group, I'll go ahead and stop the recording and you can come up and ask me, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. So thanks for your day and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Bob.